Hello, friends. Welcome back. It has been a long time since I have posted on this channel. If you are somebody who is new here, welcome. My name is Kendra, and this is my channel. I think for now I'll keep it Divinity Withinity, but I'm not sure how it'll change or if it'll change moving forward. If you aren't new here, you tuned into my last video and you saw that I was talking about moving through grief and how we were moving through this very intense pocket of collective grief that was coming up. It may have been coming up in various ways for various people. I know a lot of people have lost things. A lot of people are going through, war, devastation, turmoil. The world is going through some really massive stuff right now. And so for me, I have been deeply processing through this wave of energy that I felt. It honestly hasn't been that intense for me since I initially went through my spiritual awakening, and slightly before that, in like 2019, 2020, right when, things were really kicking off on the planet again. So I know that a lot of people, a fresh wave of the collective has been really starting to peel back the layers of what's happening on the planet and what's going on, and moving through, I guess for a better term, ascension, calling out and calling in the truth of existence, right? And everybody moves through that in a different way at different times. And I know that there was a huge pocket of people that moved through that in that 2019-2020 window. Obviously, there have been people that have been moving through and holding these energies for a long time on the planet. Some people have been very aware for, 20, 30, 40 years, maybe longer than that, so everything's constantly evolving, constantly shifting, constantly moving. But I wasn't sure when or if I would be able to be present on this channel again. And who knows, I always just tune in when I feel called to. And sometimes that's a long time in between. Posting does not always feel easy or come naturally to me. This is going to be a bit of a different video today. I don't think I'm going to pull any cards or, do any kind of divination work or tuning into energies or anything like that. I think it's just going to be a free flow channeling, I guess, or even just, vibing and seeing what comes through, because it's been such an interesting period of time and it is still continuing and ramping up. Obviously, we don't know exactly how these energies are going to really start manifesting on the planet. And if you are like me, you identify as being a balancer, a harmonizer, a stabilizer, an alchemist on this planet at this point in time. I think probably a lot of the people that are tuning in here are doing that work, whether or not you are aware. There's various levels of awareness, and like I said before, 2019, 2020, I was not remotely aware of what I was doing here or the larger picture of this period of time. I was just fully present in my day-to-day life, going to work, doing regular shit. I had no concept of any of this stuff. So I know what it's like to go from not believing in anything remotely spiritual, or I know a lot of people come from a more organized religion background. For me, I didn't have that at all. I didn't come from believing in anything, sort of larger than this physical plane of reality for the large majority of my life. I spent a long time being very confused about both my own experiences on the planet and what was coming up in general. I didn't understand how things could be so distorted on the planet in spite of like everything that we seemed to know. I remember, when you watch kids movies, especially, I grew up in, the 90s. I was born in 1987. And so much of that in kids content was about, it sort of had like an anti-capitalist message. It had a really, like family-centric, like love-centric, heart-centric, anti-material type of rhetoric, like I remember watching, just as an example, Ferngully at like probably age 4, maybe 4 or 5. And just being like so confused because you understand the message, you can, and obviously there are so many things about these stories and representations that can be seen as distorted or, maybe not having the best agenda or whatever, right? It doesn't really matter. What I'm trying to say is that the core message and principle to a lot of what I was seeing and a lot of what I was taught and a lot of what we are taught as children is blatantly opposite of what we see in the world and what we see in, the adults in our lives, the people in our lives, the school systems, the structures, the mentalities. And I feel like I can't be the only person who, as a kid, was just so confused by the disparity in what was being taught versus what was being witnessed, and the inability for the role models that we had available to us in society and in our personal lives and in our everyday experiences that were so juxtaposed to the messaging that we were receiving. It was like what we were being shown, what was being said was completely the opposite of what was being modeled. And I remember even at a young age just being so, just confused and like, I guess calling it out and being not combative, but being questioning, and asking the adults in my world questions because I didn't have the ability to comprehend like where that was coming from, and especially coming from the people who were like directly responsible for me as a child. And I don't know if I've spoken much about this on this channel before. I think a little bit. But as so many people, if not all people on this planet, my childhood was quite traumatic. Both like, as I was saying, from a collective level, just like what it is that we see in the world, what we see being represented, what we see being valued, what we see being modeled, the type of exploitation that we see, the destruction that we see, the devastation that we see, the wars, the infighting, the whatever, right? All of this distorted energy that is so present, that I think as we get older, we sort of see how the way that the energetic systems and structures are set up, they almost force this level of compliance that creates the perpetuation of the distortion of the energies, right? So anyways, I remember being just absolutely massively confused. And then as you get older, that confusion you move into the teen years, and that confusion becomes a little bit of that rebellion, that pushback, right? Where it's like you see it for so long, but you don't have any control over it. And as you start becoming more aware, because that's the stage of the process where we start to, if we have any type of ability to have healthy development, which trauma, I believe, stunts a lot of our healthy development, healthy brain development, healthy body development, healthy, the healthy individuation process that comes from being allowed to go through the natural processes of maturation, right? I can't remember what I was going. Oh yeah, so at some point in time, that individuation process looks like rebellion at a certain point in time, right? And we start rebelling against the systems and structures. We stop wanting to go to school. We stop wanting to participate, right? And so we start claiming our agency wherever we can, because we still do have this level of lack of agency where a lot of us don't have the ability to, have our own money. We're reliant on the people that, birthed us or are responsible for us or guardians of us in one way or another. We're at the mercy of what they decide to do, right? And how they decide to participate in the world. And I think, largely those structures are set up to create and perpetuate trauma, right? So when we look at, I'm big on generational trauma. I think generational trauma is such an important piece of all of this, because when we look at the systemic machination of this, of the structures that are present on this planet, they rely on the hindered development and the burnout and the triggering of survival mechanisms in people, right? In people, in the nervous systems. It's in service of destabilization of the human experience, the human nervous system, the infrastructure is based on trauma and feeds off of trauma and perpetuates trauma. And so we have to look at, right, a lot of us blame our parents for a lot of this experience, or our caregivers, or our, whatever experiences that we had of the people who were supposed to be caregivers, both individually and collectively, of the children on the planet. We can blame individuals, and absolutely individuals are responsible, because we all have agency when we get to the age of maturation, right? Once we start having agency, it is up to us to decide how we want to use our power. But we are still having agency within the mercy of the systems and structures and societal expectations that we are participating in. And for so many people, the combination of trauma and indoctrination within those systems harmonizes to create and perpetuate the trauma, right? So although we can blame the people that perpetuate it, and we absolutely should, and we should also, look at where we are responsible for perpetuating as adults. And as we start moving into our role as caregivers for the future generations and ancestors for the future generations, we do need to look at and take responsibility and ownership and agency over how we choose to show up, what we choose to embody into, what we choose to participate in, how we choose to feed the system or not. But I guess what I was trying to say is that we are all also at the mercy of the systems and structures that we exist under. And so there has to be a sort of level of understanding of the fact that trauma perpetuates trauma, indoctrination perpetuates trauma, and indoctrination perpetuates indoctrination, right? There are, of course, I do believe, a lot of people and belief systems and behaviors that knowingly perpetuate disharmony and disease and, even manufacture it in a lot of cases. But I do believe that there are mostly a lot of people that don't. They're not willing participants in these experiences, right? They're literally just a product of their own trauma, their own indoctrination, and their own survival strategies, right? So anyways, I went through a lot of that sort of rebellion as I was growing up, and yet I still had this deep desire to succeed in the system, right? As we all do, right? We want to be seen as good and successful and worthy and all of those things that we think will bring us some sort of happiness and also some sort of sense of safety, because that's how we have been modeled safety on this planet, right? The only way that we are shown it is safe to exist is to participate. And so we go through this, right, where it's like I went through sort of these fluctuations of rebellion against the system, and then also knowing and unknowing participation in certain systems, in certain experiences that are exploitative, or just otherwise like not necessarily the healthiest experiences. But in those processes, I think that we learn a lot from those experiences if we allow ourselves to learn from those experiences. And I think everybody on this planet, especially everybody on this planet that's, alive and participating at this point in time in this experience of, the term that's coming to me is cosmic maturation, soul maturation, and I didn't know how much I was going to speak on cosmic origins and all that, and I don't know if I will exactly today, but it's like this larger experience of soul maturation and understand. It's like the harmonization, the coming into the heart space for humanity. And I do believe that every soul that is alive on this planet at this point in time is from some aspect or another participating in this experience, in knowingly participating in this unfolding of this new era that we're birthing together in this phase of humanity. And I think it's so important for us to try, and especially those of us that are starting to awaken to all of this stuff or going through the process of all of this stuff, to try and hold the higher vantage point, right? Where it's like, is what we're experiencing on this planet right now like absolutely horrifying and devastating 100%. Like there's no painting over that. There's no glossing over the horrifying nature of what it is that we're experiencing and seeing. And there's so many levels to it, so many levels and so many layers to it. And I believe all of them are very important to look at and to move through. And we all are on our own individual journeys as well as our collective story here on Earth at this point in time that we're now seeing together, right? But we're all on an individual journey as well. And I believe that we, to a certain extent, are participating in the culmination of many lifetimes of experiences. And, you know, I'm a firm believer in past lives, future lives, parallel lives, whatever. I don't believe that time is linear. I believe that we experience time as a linear construct in this frame of reality. I don't believe that time is linear in the way that we view it. And I do believe that we have many different experiences of what it means to be alive, both on Earth and on other planets, in other dimensional spaces. Because really, I think at the core of it, we are all of it. We are everything. And I guess that's what I was trying to say, is it's like there is so much value in this individual human experience, this individual personal experience that we do not want to shame or bypass or devalue, right? Because it's like, what is the purpose of this experience? And why would it have been created if there was no value to it, right? I fundamentally, personally, in my worldview and what I've come to, I don't believe that it makes sense for something to exist without the ability to extract knowledge and understanding and value from the experience. I don't think that there would be any justification in creating something that was purposeless. And I guess at the end of the day, right, the purpose is something that is so subjective. It is so subjective, and if it doesn't make sense for you, if it doesn't resonate for you at this point in time, that it's purposeful or whatever, like that's valid and that's valuable in its own right? Like there's so much value to these different experiences, and so much of it is subjective. And I think that sort of is the mindfuck, the paradox of it all, is like, when you go into these different levels and stations of understanding and awareness, we understand that all of it can be true at the same time. And so your individual experience is absolutely 100% true. And however you want to make sense of that, however you want to create meaning in that, however you want to extract purpose from that or not, is entirely up to you. And that's true both because your experience as the individual is your own. And it's true because as we go up the levels of understanding of consciousness, and we recognize and get to the point in which every single individual being is part of a whole, no matter what level of existence they are on, no matter what dimension they are on, no matter what frequency they are on, no matter what planet they are on, no matter what timeline they are all part of the same whole, right? The same whole, and the same whole that is sort of, at least from this level of awareness, and I think arguably from any level of awareness, unknowable. And so when you recognize that you are all of it, the experience becomes just as subjective as the individual experience, because you realize that they are the same. They are exactly the same, right? The unified, harmonized experience of it is that it is you. It is you. And that truth can be seen at so many different levels and experienced at so many different levels, right? And so much of the paradox is being able to hold the truth at the same time as holding whatever other truth is resonant for you, right? And so much of my experience, especially, like, I mean, my whole life, like I was saying, there was so much of my sort of pendulation between trying to make sense of everything that didn't make sense, because this experience fundamentally to me doesn't make sense most of the time. And that's sort of laughable to me, because I think that there's so much sense that I have been able to make of it, but there, in the sense of understanding it, there is the fundamental paradox of it not making sense, you know, and realizing how little you truly know and truly understand about this existence. And yet there's this harmonization, this awareness, this unification of learning how to accept that and accept all of the things that feel paradoxical and feel complicated and confusing, and going down the rabbit hole both intellectually and energetically to try and make sense of it, and sort of, you know, coming up with as many answers as you have, there's new questions that are formed. And the more that you go up the ladder, the rungs of the ladder of understanding consciousness and awareness and humanity and God consciousness or source consciousness or whatever you like to apply to it, right? There is still sort of the unknowable question of, like, where did it all come from, and why does it exist in the first place? And to me, at least, I don't think that there is a knowable answer. And that becomes so interesting, because it's like, I think at one point in time that understanding, and still largely an aspect of me, didn't feel comfortable with that, and still doesn't feel comfortable with that. I'm still always trying to make sense of things and learning how to put the puzzle pieces together, and how to reconcile different opposites and different energies, right? How do we reconcile all of this information? How do we reconcile this experience, and how do we make sense of it? And I think along the way, at least in this pocket of time, after moving through, especially the past few months, I've really been moving through really heavy pockets of energy, like really not feeling motivated, feeling tired, feeling depressed, feeling really heavy and just like pointless. Like, what is the point of all of this? You know, like, what is even the, you know, not having a desire to do anything, and just really needing to focus on basic self-care, just focusing on basic day-to-day, taking care of myself, participating in my family structure, trying to figure out what's happening, why I'm feeling this way, like, what are my next steps, what are my goals, what are my desires for this next phase of my life. Because I think if you're anything like me, I think a lot of us, not only are we experiencing this instability on a collective level, this really precarious uncertainty on a collective level within the world, within world events that are playing out, within our own framework of understanding, and trying to make sense of, like, what do we do with all of this information, and how do we make sense of it, and then what are actionable things that we can do moving forward? Because yes, all of this harmonization is necessary and important, but we still are alive on this planet in these bodies at this period of time, and action is an inevitable part of life on this planet, right? there's the energetic process, and then there's also the physical process. And I think that so many of us, as we go through this shift into the next level of awareness, it's like, where do I go individually with this experience? What do we start creating? What do we build? How do we start moving within it? And there's so much of my experience that is very uncertain for me right now, even just on a day-to-day, in terms of housing, in terms of financials, in terms of like all of this really deeply structural stuff that I think is very much mirroring what's happening in the collective right now. And I think a lot of people are going through not only a destabilization in their physical world experience when it comes to the news and when it comes to all of this, but I think a lot of people are going through an upheaval of their individual felt sense of safety and stability in their lives. And if that is something that's relevant for you, I think it's definitely really important to remember that it is part of this collective shift that we're experiencing. And I think it's really impossible to shift things on a larger scale without doing the individual work to shift it internally and shift it within our own personal individual reality, right? Our own inner universe is directly correlated to what is happening on the external plane. And I do a lot of work when it comes to masculine and feminine energy and harmonizing opposites and polarizations and all that stuff, right? I think that, and I've spoken on this before, if you haven't tuned into me and you're still here with me right now, maybe not that many people are, I don't know. It could just be, again, me speaking to me through this beautiful piece of technology. And if that's the case, so be it, right? But if you're still here and present with me, I do a lot of that harmonization work, and a lot of my work focuses on heart space coherence. And what I really think that does, and I've spoken about it within the human body as the heart being the bridge between the upper and the lower chakras, the masculine and the feminine energies, the dark and the light energies, all of these different expressions of polarity that we understand, and the sort of pendulation that we experience. I truly believe that like harmonizing the opposites is what we need to do in order to rid ourselves of distortion. And that's what I want to get into right now is energetics. That's what I was going to be talking about next, I think. And I didn't quite know how to bridge into this topic, but here we go, right here. So the way that I view it is there is sort of the masculine energy polarity and the feminine energy polarity. Those are just terms. We can view it in whatever way we want. But there is the sort of the dualistic energies that are at play here. A lot of esoteric knowledge has focused on them as being masculine and feminine. It's not in terms of gender or sex. It's in terms of the energetic substance, right? What they stand for, what the embodiment of that energy looks like. So you can view it as however you want. If another term besides masculine and feminine works for you, use that. It doesn't matter, right? Whatever. The two sort of opposing dualistic forces that exist in our experience, in this experience of duality. And then I think further within those, and this is where I think a lot of the teachings get a little bit distorted, and this is only my understanding. Obviously, all of us are human on the planet. Everybody has distortions within them. I am not free of distortion. No one else is free of distortion. We exist within it, and no interpretation will ever be entirely correct, Feel free to view it in whatever way you want. Feel free to take it or leave it. If this makes sense to you, take it and run with it and apply it in whatever way makes sense to you or not. This is by no means the truth, right? This is just my own understanding of the way that the energetic principles work and my own understanding and observation with duality and polarity and how it functions. So within the masculine and the feminine energies, there is also a light and a dark energy, and a light and a dark energy. So there is the light feminine, there is the dark feminine, there is the light masculine, there is the dark masculine. And then I think distortion is a separate entity entirely. Distortion is basically a misunderstanding, a hole in the information that leads to a disharmonization within the balance of the way that those things function. And I think that's a key thing that a lot of people make the mistake of. A lot of people view darkness and distortion as the same thing. And from my observation and my learning of the energetic principles, I don't view darkness as distortion. I view distortion as a separate entity entirely. A distortion is, like I said, just a missing pocket of information that doesn't allow the energies to interact and engage, the polarities to interact and engage in the way that they were intended, right? And so what we label as darkness on this planet, from my perspective, is actually distortion. And so I don't think that there is any desire or any reason to get rid of darkness. Darkness is very useful. And what I like to look at it as is service to self and service to others. So the masculine energy represents, and this gets a little complicated because a lot of people view the feminine energy as being connected to the material world, the material realm. And some people view the feminine energy as being connected more to the energetics, right? The spiritual process, and vice versa. And I think there can also be both of those things present in both of those energies. But it gets a little convoluted and really unnecessary to like get into semantics, right? It's not necessary, I don't think, to understand the nitty-gritty of all of those things. And if it feels relevant to you, go for it. I have not yet gotten there, and maybe that's why I think it's not relevant, because I haven't yet fully gotten the understanding of how those things, the tangibility of how those things exactly function within the material world, right? But what I was trying to say is that I view darkness as the concept of service to self, and I view lightness as the concept of service to others. Both of those things can be distorted if they are not balanced out, right? And both of those things, I think the interesting part about polarity is whether we think we're doing something from the light point of view, the service to others point of view, or the service to self point of view. Both of those things can manifest in distorted ways. And they can both manifest in the same distorted ways, regardless of the polarity that they're expressing, when they are imbalanced, right? And I think that's what has been happening for so long on this planet, is an imbalanced or distorted perspective of how those two things function. And we can go sort of be split sort of into one camp of like, oh, I'm so selfless. I am so in service of others, and I am so selfless and I don't care about myself at all. You know, I would give the shirt off my own back to another person. And it's like, okay, but how does that serve you? How does that serve you in your own life, in your own experience? Why do you not value you in the same way that you value everyone else, right? That's in and of itself a distortion. And same with the other, right? Like, if you don't give a shit about anyone else, you're not recognizing that you're part of a collective whole, right? And that you're actually doing yourself a disservice, because other people are you, just like you are other people, you know, you're of in and of the same. And so if you're only moving in service of yourself, especially from a distorted place, that doesn't allow you to find your place within everyone else, doesn't allow you to experience yourself in connection to source consciousness, God energy, infinite energy, your understanding and your movement is going to be fundamentally impaired, and vice versa, right? So the way that I view moving out of duality is learning how to harmonize those energies. Oh, and what I was going to say too is the way that those things express. I view very much this awakening part of the process that we're going on is the freeing up of the repression of the feminine energy, the distortion of the feminine energy, and the forced disempowerment of the feminine energy. And so as we're going through this, my awakening has largely been based on the healing of the feminine energy. And so we hear a lot, especially in the circles that I'm part of and I've been a part of, is learning how to work with the, you know, the light feminine, I think, is the first kind of thing that comes online, right? The like love and light spirituality, which I think is beautiful. And we have a very, like, it's very useful dynamic, but it's only part of the dynamic, right? And if you get stuck in that, only that one tiny little bit over here, we miss the rest, and we miss how the whole works together, which perpetuates the distortion and so on, right? And there's so much distortion in a lot of spiritual spaces, which is fine. We're also just doing our best to learn and unlearn and grow and whatever, right? Everybody's on their own journey, and we all go through those aspects. And so then there's the idea of the dark feminine energy, where it's about rebellion and destruction and personal power and agency and reclaiming ourselves and our power to destroy and disintegrate and create, right? Like the voidal space, the power that exists in the feminine. And when it's balanced out with that love and light, when the service to self and service to others are balanced out, they function really, really very beautifully together, because it allows us to care deeply and to give profoundly, and to also have boundaries and ownership, and allow ourselves to make sure that we are included in the whole that we are of service to, right? It allows us to complete the cycle. And then the masculine energy is so interesting, because the masculine energy on our planet has been so distorted for so long as well, which is why it became imbalanced in the first place. You know, we never seek to have power over others when things are in balance. When we are in balance, moving from the heart space, moving from service to self, service to others, allowing ourselves to understand that we are the whole, we are part of the collective. Like, everything that happens to the weakest part of the collective happens to you at some point in time, vice versa. Any power that you have over anyone else is also power that somebody else will be allowed to have over you at various points in time, right? It becomes this understanding and this integration of how all of these things work together. The masculine energy is not inherently selfish. It is not inherently about power over others. It is not inherently about power over the feminine. It is not inherently materialistic and greedy and all of those things. Those are all distortions, and they can come, like I said, in the masculine and the feminine presentation. None of this has anything to do with gender, sexuality, anything like that. All of these energies and the harmonization of these energies needs to happen and is present within each individual person, regardless of their sexuality, their gender, how they identify. These things come into play when it comes to the systemic expectations that are placed on individuals to perform their sexuality or their gender or whatever, right? All of these distortions through patriarchal conditioning, anything like that can happen to anyone, masculine or feminine, right? So none of these things are inherently part of the masculine energy system. They are part of the masculine energy expression right now because of the conditioning that we've received through the systems and structures that are present on the planet at this point in time. But they're not inherently part of the masculine energy. The masculine energy is simply just another expression. But what I've really been interested in is there's not much speaking on, the masculine energy in general for sure, but I think a lot of the speaking on the masculine energy is still speaking on the distorted parts of those energies. Oh, sorry, I'm just moving my butt around on this chair. Okay, let's see. So there's still so much lack of understanding when it comes to the masculine energy. And I think that's what we're starting to unravel right now. And why so much of this is coming up right at this point in time, because there's still so much that we don't understand about what healthy masculine energy looks like, what balanced masculine energy looks like. But part of what's happening now is based on the dark masculine principle, which I've been, tapping into a lot recently, is I view the dark masculine energy as sort of an aspect of the expression of it is discomfort that fuels growth. Really difficult, deep, uncomfortable stuff that is required for growth, for learning, for education. And I believe that's exactly what we're seeing expressed on the planet right now, because I think that we really have to understand, we have to see fully and completely what is the expression of the distortion of these energies and the imbalance of these energies, what does it lead to? What does it look like? What happens? Where does it go? Where does it lead to? And that's what's coming up for us on the surface right now. We're finally able to see, what do these distortions, what do these imbalances lead to? And why, right? And without that understanding, without that lived experiential processing of what does this do? What does this look like? What does this create? What does this build? What does this sustain? How far can it get? How deep can it go? That understanding needs to be experiential for us to move into the next phase of consciousness. We have to see it. We have to look at it. We have to understand it. We have to see why it's relevant for any of us to want to heal our distortions, for any of us to want to not participate in it anymore. And I think that's especially happening for those that have been present in the deepest, darkest, most heinous parts of the expression of these energies. So when we're seeing what I think and what I believe to be a fairly small minority of distorted beings, distorted souls, distorted spiritual beliefs, distorted spiritual practices, hellish practices that rely on torture and sexual abuse and murder and, ritualistic groupthink, that I think that these people or beings would not participate in if they fully understood the mechanisms behind them. Because I think it's also just people participating in a systemic belief system and structure that they've been taught through generations, ancestrally, spiritually through lineages, through all of these things, right? It's like all of these people have this understanding, and whether or not we view them as just simply human beings, if we view them as, you know, extraterrestrial beings, as you know, demons or whatever, right? However we view them, whether human, non-human, it doesn't really matter the story behind the beings that are participating in whatever distorted energies and distorted practices are coming up right at this point in time. I don't think personally that it matters. We can come up with different speculative understandings of what's going on, and that's great if it helps to make sense to you. I like to dive into those things because I find it interesting, and I find it, like, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but I find it, I'm curious about it, and I find it thrilling and enthralling and kind of amusing as a story. If we look at it as a story that's playing out, that we get to be characters in, and we get to experience, and we get to participate in. If we view it as that, I think that we can see it as kind of interesting. And so that's how I like to go down these rabbit holes. That wasn't always the case. I went through many periods of time when I was first learning about this stuff. A few years ago, I really did a deep dive in 2020, and I like lost my fucking mind. Like, I found it so horrifying, because that was also deeply connected to my own uncovering of my own childhood sexual trauma, all of this stuff, right? So it really triggered some very deep layers for me, and it was fucked. It was horrifying to go through it. But now that I've been able to work through the energies and to process through it and to start understanding it and really making sense of it and develop my worldview and my spiritual worldview and all of those things, right? I now have been able to land in this space. But I also know what it's like to be a person who thinks that this stuff is... Okay, sorry, I'm back. My phone ran out of storage, so I had to upload the first part of the video to my computer, delete it, restart, all of that fun stuff. So there was a nice little tech interruption, which is funny because it relates to exactly what I was trying to say, or ties nicely into what I was going to say, where I was talking about how I know what it's like to be a person who thinks all of this shit is like crazy conspiracy, like woo-woo junk, right? I know exactly what that's like because I did have a friend in my teens that went through an awakening, and she was, you know, trying to explain so much of this stuff to me, and I like ended that friendship because I was like, this is fucked. This person is insane. Very sorry to that person. You know, obviously it's just part of the process, and I dealt with it a lot when I was going through my own spiritual awakening. And I think that's, you know, sort of the ironic thing is now I think a lot of the people that thought I was nuts when I was first learning about all this stuff and trying to, you know, talk about the, you know, the Epstein files and child trafficking and spiritual awakening and all that fun stuff, that thought I was absolutely insane. And I was like, I get it. I know, I get it, because I was there, you know, like so many of us also went through that period of time where we're like, those people are Delulu, Cocoa Bananas, like, don't make any sense, like, don't listen to these people, they're crazy. And so that's kind of the funny thing that we get to experience with all of this, is as we go through these processes, oh, and what I was trying to tie in, now that I'm remembering what I was saying before I had to go on that long little detour there, is that now I understand what it's like to be sort of more balanced in this understanding and have more balanced awareness of these energies and not have them be so, like, triggering, right? Like, I think even when we go through a spiritual awakening without having all of this other knowledge of what's actually happening on the planet, if you just go through a spiritual process, then all of a sudden you're like, your worldview opens up and your world opens up and you start having all of these amazing mystical experiences and beautiful ideas, right? And so it's like you have this beautiful introduction to this experience, and then for most of us, you get plunged into the dark night of the soul, which is everything but beautiful. It's painful, it's disorienting, it's terrifying. It like brings up all of your worst shit and manifests it in front of you, and you have to process through it, right? It's like very destabilizing, very debilitating. And I'm still going through it in various ways, but I feel much more harmonized in the process of understanding these energies than I did at the beginning, right? Because the initial shock of having your worldview blown up in front of you it's one of the weirdest experiences that you can go through, I think, as a person on this planet. It's very confusing, very disorienting, very alienating, because so many people don't understand you, they don't believe you, they think you're losing your mind, you know, like all of this stuff, because so much of the systemic structure has created that narrative to make us so that we don't understand fundamentally a lot of these things, right? To destabilize the playing field. It's part of the systemic structure of the power imbalance and how it gets maintained. So it's interesting now to see where so many people are still in that phase of just having their worldview blown up, right? And we're seeing this on a massive scale right now. And then we're also seeing a lot of people even within this new wave of understanding and all of this very public stuff happening. A lot of people still are unaware, you know, if it's not their time to wake up to all of this stuff. Because I do think it happens in waves for a reason, to avoid the complete destabilization of the planet, right? I think that we're going through it in waves for a reason. And it's still so interesting to watch the new wave of the people that are learning about it and awakening to it and starting to really understand and question what the fuck is going on here. Like, actually, what is happening? You know, because everything that we've been told and everything that I thought I understood is no longer relevant. You know, it blows up the foundation underneath your feet. And what you're left with is trying to make sense of that and trying to comprehend what does that mean for me, and how do I exist in this new world, you know, and then the ego death that happens from that place of destabilization. So it's just really interesting to see all of these different phases and to be able to understand all of these different levels of consciousness and where people are operating from. And I think that also too is the process of maturation and the process of coming into harmonization and heart coherence, is starting to understand all of the different aspects of where people are and how they're functioning and why they're functioning that way. And it helps us to learn how to integrate all of that, all of those experiences and all of those things that people are going through, and start having more empathy and start having more awareness and start having more authority and agency over where we direct our attention, how we choose to interpret things, how we view things, how we engage with the world, how we engage with the people around us. And that's going to be an ongoing thing, right? As we start coming into what I view now, especially as we're starting to see this really come to the forefront for a lot of people in a lot of different ways and on the world stage. This age of disclosure is massive, right? It's massive. And we're all going to have to learn how to ride the wave of how it's choosing to manifest in real time. Because, we can have different channelers, different people, different perspectives, different prophecies, all of these things, right? But from my perspective, I think there's like infinite ways that this could manifest and stabilize. And so as much as we know, there are certain things that we know, certain viewpoints that we hold, and we can become more aware and more conscious and hold more of that understanding as we grow and as we mature and as we stabilize in both our human and our divine nature and harmonize those experiences and heal ourselves and heal our perspectives and our traumas and all of that stuff, right? There is still a massive layer of unknown that will continue to be unknown and that we will have to learn how to process through and learn how to integrate and learn how to stabilize in real time. And that, I guess, is going to come back to the message again, which is the heart space. This is our way of doing so. This is the place that we come back to. This is the place that we stabilize from. It is where all of the polarities meet and integrate, and it is our direct consciousness connection to our higher source, our higher power, our highest level of creative agency, potential. It's our manifestation power. It is our personal power. It is our seat of authority. And so it's really important for us as things continue to progress, as they move forward, to, when in doubt, return to the heart space and question anything, any narrative that makes you want to shut down your empathy, to shut down your heart, to shut down your ability to feel things. And that doesn't mean that you have to feel everything. It doesn't mean that you can't titrate between. It doesn't mean that you won't go through periods of having your heart closed, of having it just be absolute devastated, heartbreak, fear, distortion. All of that shit is normal. It's a normal part of this process. We can't stay in heart coherence all the time. There needs to be a breakdown. There needs to be a destabilization. There needs to be the process of breaking apart, closing up, recovering, and returning to the heart, right? But this is our seat of power. And this is where our power lives. And this is where our connection lives. And maintaining that field stabilizes your electromagnetic field. It stabilizes your ability to create, and it stabilizes your connection to everything and everyone around you and your higher power source. So no matter what you go through, no matter what we go through as a collective in these coming moments, these coming days, months, weeks, years, of this unraveling, this unfolding, this age of disclosure, this age of understanding who we really are from a higher point of view, understanding more of ourselves, understanding more of our origins, understanding more of our power, more of our history, however that chooses to manifest, feel it all, be present with it all, allow it all, but don't allow it to take you out of your heart space, because that is where we harmonize and hold and stop the pendulum from swinging back and forth. If we keep going into this polarized rhetoric, we will keep perpetuating exactly what it is that we are trying to stabilize, what we are trying to harmonize, and what we are trying to become aware of so that we can create from our full potential. Duality destabilizes that potential. It keeps us, it facilitates distortion. It perpetuates all of this shit that was useful, that was interesting, that was part of what we were going through, part of what we were experiencing, part of what we were learning from, part of what we were integrating. But the heart space is where we start creating the new. So that would be my biggest takeaway. If you are here still, I don't know if anyone managed to stay till the end of it. But if you are here and if you are present with me, always come back here. Always come back here. Forever and always. Through the heart. That's where we'll do it all. That's where we can do it all. That's where our power is. Right? It's exactly what we need to do. So, no matter what happens, be in your human body, be in your experience, be in your process. Allow yourself to fall apart a million times if you need to. Allow yourself to feel your fear. Allow yourself to grow. Allow yourself to be, allow the ego death to happen. Allow the dark night of the soul to happen. If it has to happen a million times, I just went through a massive one. I probably am still in the middle of it. I might have another one. I might have 50 other ones. That was a big takeaway that I got from a video yesterday. No person, no matter how enlightened they are, if they are present on this planet or otherwise, nobody is immune from the real life experience of what it is to be a feeling, living, breathing human being on this planet at this point in time. No guru, no enlightened, whatever, no channeler, there is no way that you can spiritually enlighten yourself out of the process of being human and out of the process of what it means to go through this awakening process. If you're feeling it, you're not doing it wrong. You're feeling it because you're feeling it. And wherever you are, it's the process. But always remember, your heart space is the key. Your heart space is the key. Your heart space is the key. I'm saying that to myself too. I'm looking directly at myself. Your heart space is the fucking key. So remember that. And try and find pockets of joy and try and find pockets of things that keep you going. And remember to live your own individual journey. And not everything is falling apart. It's just falling away in order for us to be able to create more of what it is that we came here to create. And that might not be a pleasant process for quite a while. And it may also be a pleasant process. Who knows, right? And that's also, like I've said before, suffering can be a choice. And sometimes it's a necessary choice. Sometimes it's part of the process. But we get to choose how we experience this next chapter. We get to choose. No matter what happens around us, we get to choose how we experience it and how we embody into it and what we do with that. That's your agency. That's your power. That's your potential. And nobody can take that away from you, regardless of what is happening externally. So yeah, I think that's the message. That was a long one. I don't know, who knows? So anyways, if you stayed with me till the end, thank you very much for being here. If you didn't, also thank you very much for being here. If you hated this video, that's okay. Thanks for being here. If you loved it, extra thanks for being here. If you want to, like, comment, subscribe, be a person in the world that connects with this person in the world if you want to. If not, peace. Go out there and do what feels right for you. Okay, take care.